Psalm 121. I lift up my eyes to the hills. From whence does my help come? My help comes from the Lord who made heaven and earth. The Lord will not let your foot be moved. The Lord who keeps you will not slumber. Behold, the one who keeps Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord is your keeper. The Lord is your shade on your right hand. The sun shall not smite you by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord will keep you from all evil and will keep your life. The Lord will keep your going out and your coming in for this time forth and forevermore.
Esther, chapter 7, verses 1 through 6, and 9 and 10. So the king and Haman came to banquet with Esther, the queen. The king said again to Esther on the second day at the banquet of wine, "What is your petition, Queen Esther? It shall be granted you. What is your request? Even to the half of the kingdom it shall be performed." Then Esther the queen answered, "If I have found favor in your sight, O king, and if it pleases the king, let my life be given me at my petition, and my people at my request. For we are sold, and I and my people to be destroyed, to be slain, and to perish. But if we have been sold for male and female slaves, I would have held my peace, although the adversary could not have compensated for the king's loss." Then the king said to Esther, the queen, "Who is he, and where is he who dared presume in his heart to do this?" Esther said, "An adversary, an enemy, even this wicked Haman." Then Haman was afraid before the king and the queen. The king arose in his wrath from the banquet of wine and went into the palace garden. And Haman stood up to make request for his life to Esther the queen, for he saw that there was evil determined against him by the king. Then the king returned out of the palace garden into the place of the banquet of wine, and Haman had fallen on the couch where Esther was. Then the king said, "Will he even assault the queen in front of me in the house?" As the word went out of the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face. Then Heborah, one of the eunuchs who was with the king, said, "Behold, the gallows 50 cubits high, which Haman had made for Mordecai, who spoke good for the king, is standing at Haman's house." The king said, "Hang him on it." So they hanged Haman on the gallows that he had prepared for Mordecai. Then the king's wrath was pacified. The word of God for the people of God. It was a Perry Mason moment. The queen had summoned the king and all of his advisors to a banquet because she wanted to make a petition before the king. And everyone was on their pins and needles as they waited for what the queen wanted to ask the king. She had risked her life to go to the king to ask for this petition because the king had made a law that said no one could come to him asking any request without him summoning them to him on pain of death. Kings in the Bible sometimes make bad decisions. Sometimes kings in the real world make bad decisions. And this was a bad decision because the petition that Queen Esther wanted to give to the king was to protect her people. You see, there was a plot amongst some of those very same advisors that were there to kill all of the Jews in Persia. And Mordecai, Esther's cousin, had informed her of this plot by Haman, an enemy of Mordecai. And Haman despised Mordecai because he thought that Mordecai was getting more attention than he deserved, and that Haman deserved the glory and the honor that the king was giving to Mordecai because Mordecai had discovered a plot to kill the king and had informed the palace guards. So Haman plotted that on a certain day, an order would go out and all of the officials, the governors and the town authorities would go out and round up the Jews and kill them. And Haman had built a special gallows in his very yard to hang Mordecai on. And when Mordecai came to Esther with this plot, he asked her to go to the king and expose this evil. But at first, Esther was a bit afraid. She said, "Don't you remember the king made this law that nobody can come and ask anything of him unless the king himself summons them? And anybody that disobeyed the law would be killed." And she said, "I am under that law also." But then Mordecai reminded her that she may have been placed in this position for this very reason, to save her people. And with courage, she went to the king and asked that he attend a banquet that she was going to throw so that he could ask her, so that she could ask him a favor. And so the banquet had been going on for 2 days and everybody was feeling good. And the king came to Esther and said, "What is it that you want? And I will grant it up to half of my kingdom." What a lavish response that the king has to Esther. He didn't even know what the request was, but he was feeling so good from this banquet that he was willing to offer up to half of his kingdom to the queen. And she said, if it finds favor with the king, please spare my people and spare my life also, because there is a wicked plot to kill all the Jews, and I am a Jew. Well, probably some of those officials there at the banquet probably suddenly realized what was going on here. And I can imagine a few of them probably started to get up from the table and to leave, those who were involved in the plot. But the king knew nothing of the plot. And he said, who is organizing this evil thing? And Esther pointed to Haman and she said, him. He is the one doing the evil. The king explodes with wrath and he storms out of the banquet. Haman, now realizing the dangerous situation that he was in, he didn't realize that the queen was also Jewish. He goes to her and begs for his life. Yet when the king comes back in, to some extent, he must have thought over the situation a bit. And he came back and he sees Haman with the queen in a somewhat compromising situation. No doubt he was trying to get the queen to forgive him and had actually fallen on the very couch that she was on, like he was assaulting her. And the king sees this and his rage boils and he orders that Haman to be arrested. And he was arrested and sent away. One of the eunuchs of the household told the king that Haman had built a gallows in his very yard to hang some of the Jews. And the king orders Haman to be hung from the very gallows that he had made for himself. And only then was the king's wrath pacified. It's an interesting story. The book of Esther is unique in the Bible in a number of ways. It's the only book of the Old Testament that they have not found in the Dead Sea Scrolls. And it is only one of two books of the Bible in which God's name is never mentioned. The other is Song of Samuel or the Song of Songs. God is never mentioned in this story, and many people wonder, why is this even included in the Bible? Well, it actually sets up the holiday of Purim, a Jewish holiday in which the Jews celebrate their salvation, that they were saved from destruction of the Persians. And it's a holiday that Jewish people all over the world celebrate. And some scholars believe that this story was invented to justify that holiday. And even though there's some inconsistencies with the history that we know, it's a good story in that it signifies how God really does work in our world in many cases. There are times where God breaks through, such as the coming of Jesus, his son, breaks through into history and comes among us. And those are marvelous times and marvelous things when God's miracles come to work. But most often, God kind of works in the background. And we don't always see his miracles at work. Mordecai is right when he says to Esther that she may have been placed here in this situation to save her people, and she had to find a way and the courage to confront the king. God works in areas that we never see. God works behind the scenes. He moves people here and there so that his will be done. And sometimes we just don't see those miracles. And in many ways, this is a miracle that the most powerful men in Persia were defeated by the young queen, Esther. And it's not Esther's power that did this. It was God's power moving in the background, moving unseen. God still moves in the world today. And many people don't always see God at work. Matter of fact, I'd say most people don't see God at work today. I have people all the time, good, faithful Christian people, who say, why doesn't God do miracles? They don't see the miracle. I've heard pastors say this. They've never seen a miracle. Yet I have seen miracles at work in the world. God still is there in ways that are unexpected. He brings people forward to do his will, people that you would never expect. And a recent example I heard about was a group of college students in the Philippines who were organizing food relief for people affected by disasters in that area. Young people at work organizing and feeding those in need. And many people would say that that's not a miracle. That's just people doing what God told them to do. But in many ways, yes, that is a miracle. The miracle occurs in many different ways. First, getting the people excited over this ministry, finding a place where they could package food, finding people to donate the food, and then getting the food to where it was needed. In many ways, that is miraculous that all of that could come together to help people in need. God is still at work, even though we don't see him. And I would say most of the time we don't see him. Yet God is there. God is there working to save his people. Christ came to save his people. That is a true miracle. Yet God is still at work today, saving those people around us. And all we need to do is open our eyes to see those miracles. Finally, I want to talk a little bit about Haman and the evil that he caused or was going to cause. He was so jealous and envious of Mordecai that he was going to destroy an entire group of people, a truly evil thing. And in his lust for power and in his search for glory of self-aggrandizing, he built the very gallows that he was hung upon. We need to be careful of what we build. We should be building for good and not for evil. Because when we build for evil, that evil comes back upon us. The Bible warns us, don't dig a pit, for you will fall into it. Don't
plan evil, or that evil will come back to you. Always strive for the good. Strive for what Christ calls us to do. When we strive to love one another and not to destroy one another, good comes about. When we follow God's will, God always triumphs. And even when we don't follow God's will, when we do plan evil, God's will triumphs in the end. And those who did the evil will be destroyed, either in this life or in the life to come. Be careful what you build. If you build for evil, you will fall to that evil. But if you build for the good, you will be able to triumph and overcome whatever evil comes your way. Amen.